It's Thanksgiving, and our house smells like roasted turkey, spiced pumpkin pies, and expensive candles that cost more than a month's rent for most people. The halls are adorned with golden garlands, velvet ribbons, and the kind of crystal chandeliers that make you squint at their brilliance. From the outside, it's perfection. From the inside, well, perfection always has its cracks. I am Hazel, and tonight, I should be the happiest woman alive. I have a husband who's a billionaire, a beautiful mansion, and a son who can light up a room with his smile. Everyone else sees the picture-perfect life, but I've learned over the years that picture-perfect is a dangerous illusion. The family started arriving early. Ethan, my husband, greeted everyone with a warm smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. His mother, Margaret, swept in wearing pearls and an expression that could freeze fire. Ryan, Ethan's younger brother, arrived with a self-satisfied smirk, his wife clinging to him as if her life depended on it, which in their world, it kind of did. As the first toasts were made, I noticed it. Just a subtle shadow beneath Ethan's eye, a hint of purple and blue that didn't belong. My stomach sank before I even realized I had seen it. I tried to brush it off. Perhaps he had bumped into a door or tripped over the stairs. It could happen in a house this large. But the bruise? It wasn't fresh enough for an accident today. It had a story, one that Ethan wasn't telling. Our son Oliver didn't seem to notice. He ran through the living room, giggling, chasing the family dog who was far too excited about the turkey to care about anything else. Ethan's smile faltered as Oliver ran up to him, tugging at his sleeve. "Daddy, what happened to your eye?" The room fell silent. Even the dog seemed to sense the sudden tension. My heart beat faster. I forced a smile, tried to steer the conversation elsewhere, but I knew everyone had seen it. Margaret's eyes narrowed ever so slightly, and Ryan's smirk became sharper, more predatory. "Just a little mishap at the office, Oliver," Ethan said, his voice steady, but not quite calm. "Nothing to worry about, nothing to worry about." The words sounded hollow, even to me, and yet the guest nodded politely, as if that explanation were enough. But in this house, appearances matter more than truth. Dinner began. The table gleamed under the chandelier's light. Polished silver, delicate china, crystal glasses filled with sparkling water and wine. I watched the family from my seat across from Ethan, trying to gauge their expressions without letting them see mine. Margaret, as usual, held court with a controlled elegance, commenting on everything from the turkey's golden crust to the decor. Ryan made subtle jabs at Ethan, calling him careful, careful, as if hinting at some unseen weakness. Their eyes flicked toward me at times, as if silently asking, "Do you see it too?" I felt trapped. The house was filled with laughter, polite chatter, and the clinking of silverware. But beneath it, there was a current of tension I couldn't ignore. The bruise on Ethan's eye wasn't just an injury. It was a symbol of something deeper, something dangerous, and I knew that whatever it wasn't meant for me to see. Yet, as we ate, I tried to make small talk. "Oliver, did you help with the pumpkin pie?" I asked, reaching out to squeeze his hand. "Yes, I mixed the cinnamon," he said proudly, crumbs spilling onto the table. I smiled, grateful for his innocence. At least someone in this room could be completely unaware of the underlying chaos. But my eyes kept drifting back to Ethan. He spoke less than usual, laughed when he was supposed to, and avoided eye contact. There was a tension in his jaw, a tightness that told me he was holding something back. I wanted to ask, to reach across the table and demand the truth, but something in me hesitated. Part of me feared the answer. Part of me feared that the truth would shatter this carefully constructed life. The life that everyone admired from the outside. And yet, I couldn't ignore it. After dinner, as everyone settled in the living room with brandy and dessert, I found myself next to Ethan on the couch, He tried to offer a reassuring smile. "Hazel, it's nothing," he said quietly, his hand brushing mine. "Just business stuff. Forget about it tonight." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to let this night be about family, about gratitude, about the moments that make life feel safe. But the bruise under his eye, subtle but undeniable, whispered a secret that demanded attention. Margaret poured more brandy for herself and Ryan, then looked at Ethan, her eyes sharp. "You've been busy, haven't you?" she said. Her tone was casual, but there was a cutting edge to it, a test of control. Ethan's lips tightened. He didn't answer immediately. Ryan chuckled, leaning back in his chair. "Looks like someone finally got the upper hand," he said, eyes flicking to Ethan's bruise. Laughter bubbled up from the others at the table, but it felt cruel. A reminder that in this family, power is always at play, and the slightest vulnerability is a weapon. I felt a chill. Ryan's words, Margaret's glance. It was all too deliberate. Everyone saw the bruise. Everyone understood the unspoken hierarchy of dominance and shame. And me? I was sitting in the middle, caught between love, fear, and growing suspicion. After dessert, while the family lingered in polite conversation, I slipped into the kitchen. I needed a moment to breathe, to process, to find clarity in the chaos. The kitchen was empty. The only sounds the hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the wall clock. I leaned against the counter, staring at the marble surface, trying to steady my thoughts. I knew this was only the beginning. A bruise under the eye might seem small to anyone else, but in this house, it was a sign, a warning, a crack in the golden armor of our lives. I didn't know it yet, but by tomorrow, the illusion of perfection would start to crumble, and I would see my life, my marriage, my family, my carefully curated world, in a way I could never unsee, because the truth was waiting just beneath the surface, and it was about to explode in a way I never could have imagined. And that's when I realized the perfect Thanksgiving was a lie. The night didn't get easier. After the last bite of pumpkin pie and the clinking of empty glasses, the family lingered in the living room. Everyone was in that delicate balance between satisfaction and fatigue. Laughter forced just enough to keep appearances, but I couldn't relax. Every corner of the room felt sharp, like a blade waiting to cut, and I knew I had to pay attention. Ethan, as usual, was quiet, nursing his brandy with deliberate care. I could see the bruise beneath his eye, even in the dim light. A muted purple that refused to fade. I wanted to ask him again, wanted him to tell me the truth, but I also knew better. The truth in this family wasn't given. It was uncovered, clawed out, and sometimes it was used as a weapon. That's when I started hearing the whispers. Not from strangers, not from the staff, from the family. The people who should have loved him unconditionally. Margaret leaned toward Ryan, speaking softly, so that it seemed innocent. But the words carried weight, venom even. He got what he deserved, Margaret whispered, her eyes never leaving Ethan. I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. Did I hear that right? What did she mean? Ryan smirked, tilting his head as he nodded. Karma has a way of finding the right people, he murmured, low enough that I had to lean closer to hear. My blood ran cold. Were they talking about Ethan? Was this some cruel joke? Or, worse, was it a warning? I glanced at Ethan. He was silent, his face unreadable. I wanted to reach out, to touch his hand, to ground myself with the only certainty I had left. But I didn't. Something in him told me he didn't want me involved. Didn't want me to see whatever storm was brewing. The room felt smaller all of a sudden. The polished hardwood, the gilded frames, the shimmering chandelier. All of it seemed to press against me, a reminder that appearances could hide terrible things. And yet, here I was, the supposed matriarch of this golden life, powerless to stop it. After a moment, Ryan laughed softly, a sound that grated like metal on glass. "It's just business, Hazel," he said, not even bothering to hide the slight edge of mockery. "You wouldn't understand." The words hit me like a slap. Business. Always business. In this family, business was life, and life was a game of power, secrets, and manipulation. And I, somehow, had been caught in the middle. Collateral damage in a war I didn't even know I was fighting. I excused myself to the kitchen, pretending to check on the dishes, but my ears remained tuned to their conversation. Ethan followed a few steps behind, as if sensing my unease, but he didn't say a word. "What's going on?" I asked softly, unable to hide the tremor in my voice. Ethan's eyes darted around, careful to avoid mine. "Nothing," he said. "Really? Don't worry about it." But I did worry, and when he avoided my gaze, my suspicion grew. Something was happening, something he couldn't or wouldn't tell me. I poured myself a glass of water, hands trembling slightly. The kitchen was dim, lit only by the under-cabinet lights, the shadows stretching across the floor like fingers. I leaned against the counter, heart pounding, thinking of the bruise. Had it happened because of Ryan, or someone else entirely? Ethan stood behind me, and I could feel his presence, solid, comforting, yet distant. "Hazel," he said, his voice low, "please, just enjoy tonight. Don't let them get to you." "They?" I asked, turning to look at him. "Who are they, Ethan?" He didn't answer immediately. He simply ran a hand through his hair, his expression unreadable. Then finally he said, "You don't need to worry about it." "I promise." But promises in this house were like glass. Beautiful, fragile, and easily shattered. I returned to the living room, trying to keep a calm facade. Margaret and Ryan were still talking, still whispering, and the tension was like a living thing, curling around my shoulders. I caught snippets of phrases. "Shouldn't have crossed him." "Finally pay the price." "Don't let Hazel find out." My stomach dropped. The last one. "Don't let Hazel find out." Hit me like a hammer. They were talking about me. My mind spun. What could they possibly be hiding from me? I moved closer, pretending to admire a painting on the wall, straining to catch more of their conversation. Margaret's voice was soft but clipped, each word carefully chosen. "You know what will happen if she finds out," she said. "Everything falls apart." I clenched my fists under my skirt. "Find out what?" Ryan laughed softly, almost cruelly. "Let her stay in the dark a little longer. The moment she knows, well, you know how she is." I did know. I am Hazel. I am not someone who stays in the dark when danger approaches. And the moment they implied that my ignorance was safer, my instincts screamed at me that the truth was far worse than I could imagine. Ethan stepped into my line of sight, standing between me and Margaret and Ryan. His hand brushed mine lightly. "Hazel," he said again, softer this time. "Just let it go, please." I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand answers, but something inside me held back. A quiet, burning instinct to wait, to observe, to collect every piece of the puzzle before moving. Later that night, after the family had departed, the house was silent, except for the occasional creak of the floors and the soft hum of the heating system. Ethan and I sat together on the couch, a rare moment of quiet. He looked tired, haunted, and I finally let myself study the bruise closely. "It's worse than you're letting on," I said finally. He shook his head. "It's nothing, Hazel. Just a disagreement. At the office." I pressed further. With Ryan, Ethan hesitated, a flicker of something in his eyes. Guilt? Fear? Before he said, "I can't tell you right now." That was all I needed. I knew the truth was dangerous, that whatever had happened tonight was just the surface. And I also knew one thing. The whispers at the table were a warning. This family, my family now, thrived on secrets. and someone had already decided I wasn't meant to know. As I lay in bed later, staring at the ceiling of our master suite, I replayed the evening over and over. Each whispered word, each glance, each subtle laugh became a clue, a thread I had to pull to unravel the truth. And deep inside, a quiet resolve began to form. If they thought I would remain in the dark, they were wrong. Tomorrow, I promised myself, I would start observing more closely, listening more carefully. Every word, every look, every gesture. It could be the key to understanding what really happened to Ethan and why everyone in that room had behaved as if the bruise under his eye was the most important thing in the world. And somewhere in the shadows of the house, I felt a shift, a subtle tension that whispered of danger, betrayal, and secrets far larger than I could imagine. The perfect Thanksgiving was already unraveling, and I was the first to notice the threads coming undone. The bruise under Ethan's eye wasn't the first. I remembered the first time I saw him with a mark like that. Years ago, before money, before power, before the walls of this mansion and the weight of this family. Back then, we lived in a small apartment, the kind of place where the peeling paint told stories of people who had lived there long before us. Ethan was kind, funny, ambitious, but the world had a way of bruising him. Literally sometimes. Once, he came home with a black eye after defending a colleague from an aggressive client. He laughed it off then, claiming it was a badge of honor. I had kissed it and bandaged it, believing in his innocence, believing that love could protect us from the cruelty of the world. But the bruise tonight, this one didn't carry the same story. It was different, heavier, darker. The kind of bruise that came not from defending someone else, but from a collision of secrets, betrayal, and power. I traced the line of the shadow beneath his eye with my eyes, careful not to touch it, careful not to reveal how deeply I noticed. My mind wandered, unbidden, to the changes that had crept into our lives over the years. When Ethan inherited his father's fortune and became CEO, everything shifted. He changed slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. The humor, the warmth, the light in his eyes. It all dimmed. Conversations turned into strategies. Smiles became measured. Laughter became optional. And I, who had loved him for the man he once was, had to navigate a new terrain of suspicion and subtle power plays. The bruise reminded me of all of that, of all the nights I had stayed awake, worrying about what kind of man I had married, worrying about the family I had married into, the people who applauded our love, our wealth, our life, yet would stab us in the back the moment it suited them. I remembered a Thanksgiving long ago, before the mention, before the media attention, when we were just Ethan, me, and our dreams. He had been anxious about his first big promotion, worried he would fail, worried he would let people down. I had reassured him, held his hand, kissed the worry from his forehead, and that night, when he came home with a faint bruise from the office scuffle, I had felt nothing but concern, empathy, and love. Tonight, the memory was a knife, because I realized the bruises had changed. They no longer came from defending others, or from small missteps in a world that demanded perfection. They came from battles I couldn't see, from wars waged in boardrooms, in whispered conversations, in phone calls I wasn't meant to hear. I couldn't help but wonder, had the man I loved become a prisoner of this wealth, this power, this family, or had the bruises become a way to control, to hide, to manipulate the truth? I watched Ethan closely that night. Every subtle gesture, every micro-expression. His hands trembled slightly when no one was looking. His jaw tightened at moments I could only barely catch. And every so often, his eyes flicked toward Margaret and Ryan, toward the people whose whispers had haunted me all evening, with a mix of fear and resignation. I wanted to ask him again what happened, but I hesitated, because even as my heart ached for the man I loved, I knew that asking the wrong question could shatter the fragile peace we maintained. In this house, questions were dangerous. Curiosity was a weapon. And the truth could kill. So I kept my distance, letting my mind wander back to the past, to the man Ethan used to be. I remembered how he once held me when I cried over my first failed business venture. How he whispered, "We'll build something together, Hazel, you and me." And I had believed him. I had believed in us. But now, as I watched him sit quietly on the couch, nursing his brandy, the bruise under his eye like a silent accusation, I realized that our marriage had evolved into something unrecognizable. Love was no longer enough. Trust had been tested, broken, and questioned, and I could no longer tell whether the man I had married still existed beneath the layers of power, secrets, and family loyalty. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the sprawling estate that had once been a dream and now felt like a gilded cage. The wind rustled the trees, the lights of the city twinkled in the distance, and I realized that my world, our world, was shifting. The bruise was more than a mark on skin. It was a warning, a key, a sign that something deeper, darker, and more dangerous was happening. I remembered a conversation I had had with a friend years ago. Before money and power complicated everything, she had said, "Hazel, always pay attention to the small signs. The ones people think you won't notice. That's where the truth hides." Tonight, I was paying attention. Every whispered word at the dinner table, every subtle glance, every laugh that felt too sharp. I was taking notes in my mind, piecing together a puzzle that no one wanted me to solve. And in that puzzle, the bruise under Ethan's eye was the first glaring piece. Later, after everyone had gone to bed, Ethan and I sat in silence in the living room. The fire crackled softly in the hearth, casting flickering shadows on the walls. I dared to speak, my voice steady, despite the storm raging inside me. "Ethan, tell me the truth. About tonight, about the bruise, about Ryan." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for a brief moment, the man I had loved all those years surfaced. His eyes were filled with conflict, with guilt, with a weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion. "It's complicated," he said finally. "You wouldn't understand if I told you." I stood, pacing the room, my mind racing. "Try me," I said softly but firmly. "I've lived in this world with you. I've seen the shadows behind the wealth, the whispers behind the smiles. I can handle the truth, Ethan. I need it." He sighed, running a hand through his hair, the tension in his shoulders, betraying the calm mask he always wore in public. "It's not just Ryan. It's everything. The company, the family, the money. They don't play fair, Hazel. They don't care about us. And sometimes, I do things I shouldn't to protect us, to protect you." I stopped, my heart hammering. "You've hurt yourself?" I asked, my voice trembling. He looked at me, eyes haunted. "It's not what you think. The bruise, it's a warning, a message. And if I tell you more, it could put everything at risk." I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words. Everything at risk. Everything. And in that moment, I realized something essential. I couldn't rely on anyone else to protect me. Not him, not the family, not even the life we had built together. The bruise under Ethan's eye had opened old wounds, yes, but it had also awakened something new, a clarity, a determination, a refusal to be left in the dark. And as I looked at him, sitting there quietly, vulnerable and distant, I made a decision. I would uncover the truth, piece by piece, whisper by whisper, no matter the cost. Because in a house built on secrets and power, the only way to survive was to see everything. And so I waited, and I watched, knowing that the bruise under his eye was only the beginning of a story that would change our lives forever. Sleep should have come easily that night. After all, the mansion was quiet. The fire in the living room had burned down to embers, and even the staff had retreated to their quarters. But I couldn't sleep. The bruise on Ethan's eye, the whispers at the dinner table, and the cold, calculated glances of Margaret and Ryan all spun in my mind like a storm I couldn't escape. Something didn't sit right. My instincts told me, no, demanded, that I stay alert. There was danger here. Danger I couldn't yet name. So, when I heard the faint sound of footsteps in the kitchen around midnight, I didn't panic. I simply went to investigate. The hallway was dark, lit only by the soft glow of the moon streaming through the windows. My bare feet made no sound on the polished hardwood. I could hear the subtle creak of someone's shoes. But they weren't the familiar footsteps of the household staff. No, these were deliberate, purposeful, careful. I crept closer to the kitchen doorway, pressing my back against the wall. My breath was quiet, controlled. And then I saw them, Ethan, Margaret, and a stranger. The stranger was tall, dressed in a dark suit that somehow seemed out of place in the quiet kitchen of a family estate. The way he moved, the way he spoke in hushed, urgent tones, made it clear he belonged to a world I didn't know. A world of deals, threats, and secrets. I pressed myself closer to the doorway, careful not to make a sound, listening to every word. "You can't let her find out," Margaret said, her voice sharper than I had ever heard it. "It'll destroy everything." The stranger's voice was calm, almost condescending. "She won't, not unless someone makes a mistake." Margaret's eyes flicked toward Ethan. "She's smarter than you think, and curious. Hazel doesn't stay in the dark easily." I felt a chill run down my spine. Hazel doesn't stay in the dark easily. They were talking about me. My pulse quickened. Ethan's voice, low and measured, joined the conversation. "It has to stay contained. If Hazel finds out, it's not just our reputation at stake. It could ruin everything. The company, the family, the legacy." My heart pounded. Legacy? Company? What had I missed? What were they hiding from me? And why had Ethan never trusted me with the truth? The stranger leaned in, speaking softly, almost a hiss. "The files are ready. Everything you asked for is here. But if she sees them..." He let the sentence hang in the air, a warning unspoken, but understood. Margaret's hand clutched her pearls, tight enough to leave dents in her skin. "No, not until the time is right. Hazel doesn't suspect a thing yet." I had to control myself. My hands were trembling, my chest tight. I wanted to rush forward, to demand answers, to confront them, but I knew better. Right now, I was a witness, a silent observer, and that was exactly what I needed to be. I backed away slowly, making sure not to knock over the vase on the counter. My mind was spinning. Files? What files? What could possibly be so important that they would meet at midnight in secret? Ethan's hand brushed Margaret's lightly, almost apologetically, as he spoke again. "Once this is done, everything will be secure. And Hazel, she'll be safe. But she has to stay out of it. At all costs." I felt a jolt of fear mixed with anger. Safe? Safe from what? And why didn't he trust me enough to tell me the truth? I lingered for a few more seconds, straining to catch every word, every nuance, every inflection. The stranger finally nodded, collecting some papers from the counter, then disappeared down the hallway, leaving Ethan and Margaret alone. Margaret's posture softened slightly, though her eyes were still sharp, calculating. "You're pushing it too far, Ethan," she said quietly. "Hazel will notice. She always notices." Ethan's jaw tightened. "And I'm doing what has to be done. For us. For the company. For the family. If she knew, she wouldn't understand. She'd interfere. Interfere." The word echoed in my mind. I wanted to scream. I wanted to confront them. I wanted to demand the truth. But I stayed quiet, silent in the shadows, absorbing every detail. And then they left the kitchen, separating down different hallways. I waited a full 5 minutes before moving, making sure the coast was clear. The stranger was gone. Margaret had disappeared into her bedroom, and Ethan, I wasn't sure, but I had learned enough. I retreated to my bedroom, heart hammering, mind racing. The night was alive with secrets, and I was no longer just a passive participant. I was awake now, alert, ready. I couldn't shake the feeling that something monumental was happening behind the walls of this house. Something that had nothing to do with the dinner table, with smiles, with appearances. And I knew, deep in my bones, that the bruise under Ethan's eye was just the beginning, the files, the stranger, the midnight meeting. Every piece was a clue, a thread in a web that I had been too blind to notice before. And I realized something terrifying. Whatever was hidden in those papers, whatever Ethan and Margaret were protecting, it wasn't just about business, it was personal. I lay in bed for hours, unable to sleep, replaying every word, every glance, every whisper from that night. The house was quiet, but my mind was loud, and for the first time, I felt the stirrings of something I hadn't allowed myself before. A determination to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Because in a house built on secrets, and in a family that thrived on control, the only way to survive was to see everything, and I was ready to start. The morning after the midnight meeting, the mansion felt different. The golden light of the sun spilling through the tall windows couldn't soften the heaviness that clung to the walls. Breakfast was quiet. Oliver ate his pancakes with the oblivious joy of a child, unaware of the undercurrents swirling around him. I envied his innocence. Even as I tried to shield him from the storm, I was slowly uncovering. Ethan sat across from me, sipping coffee in silence. The bruise under his eye was still visible, a muted purple shadow that pulsed like a warning. Margaret had already begun her usual morning scrutiny. Subtle glances, slight nods, an unspoken measuring of the room. Ryan, absent from breakfast, had excused himself, claiming meetings. The house felt smaller, quieter, more suffocating. I finally decided I couldn't wait any longer. The bruise, the whispers, the secret meeting. It was all too much. I needed answers, and the person I had to get them from first was Ethan. After breakfast, I pulled him into the study, away from the servants, the cameras, the eyes of the family. The room smelled faintly of old books and polished wood, a comforting smell in a house full of tension. I closed the door behind us, and finally I spoke. "Ethan," I said softly, "I need you to tell me the truth. About the bruise, about last night, about Ryan. I need to know everything." He looked at me, and I saw it. A flicker of something in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. Fear, guilt, resignation, perhaps all three. He sighed deeply and ran a hand through his hair, the weight of secrets pressing down on him. "It's complicated," he said finally. His voice was low, almost a whisper. "You wouldn't understand. I'll never understand if you don't try," I countered. "I've lived in this world with you. I've seen the power games, the whispers, the threats. I can handle the truth, Ethan. I need it." He hesitated, then nodded, as if preparing himself to spill something dangerous. "The bruise, it wasn't just a random accident. It's connected to Ryan, but not in the way you think." My stomach twisted. "Not in the way I think. Then how?" He took a deep breath, staring at the floor for a moment before meeting my eyes. "Ryan found out about the shell accounts. The ones I've been using to move money quietly. I used your name on them, Hazel. To protect myself, to protect us." I froze. "My name? What do you mean, my name?" "I mean, I created accounts in your name to hide funds, to maneuver money without alerting the family," Ethan admitted. His voice was strained, tight with guilt. "I thought it was the only way to keep Ryan from discovering the full picture. But he found out, and he attacked me." The room seemed to tilt. My heart pounded so violently, I thought it might burst through my chest. You used my name, without telling me. I thought it was safer this way, he said, his voice cracking slightly. I didn't want to worry you. I didn't want you to get involved. I thought I could handle it. I felt a mixture of shock, betrayal, and anger. My name, my identity, my trust, used as a shield in a war I didn't even know existed. The anger rose like a wave, threatening to consume me. You thought it was safer? I whispered, my voice trembling. Do you realize what you did? Do you realize how this could ruin me if it came out? He flinched at my words, guilt written all over his face. I know it could have destroyed you. That's why I kept it secret. I was trying to protect you. I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. Protect me? Ethan, hiding things, manipulating accounts in my name, and letting your own brother hurt you. That's not protection. That's betrayal. His eyes filled with pain. I never wanted to hurt you. I swear, Hazel. I did it for us. For the family. For the company. For everything we've built. I thought I was making the right decisions. And Ryan? I asked, trying to steady my voice. Was he just defending himself? Or was this some vendetta? Ethan hesitated. A little of both. Ryan is calculating. He's always wanted control. The company, the power, everything. When he realized I was maneuvering behind his back, he lashed out. That bruise, it was a warning. A message. Don't cross him. Don't get in his way. And I let it happen. I didn't tell you because I thought it would protect you. But it didn't. It just made everything worse. The room was silent, except for the sound of our breathing. The weight of his confession settled over me like a storm cloud. I felt betrayed, but I also felt the tiniest flicker of understanding. He wasn't evil. He was scared. He was trapped in a family and a system that didn't forgive weakness. But that didn't excuse what he had done. So all this time, I said slowly, you've been using me as a shield. My name, my reputation, all of it. To protect yourself from your brother, from your mother, from the family. Yes, he admitted, his voice barely audible. I never meant to hurt you. I thought I was doing the right thing. I looked at him, seeing the man I had loved, and the man I barely knew coexisting in the same body. And I realized something crucial. Love wasn't enough. Trust was fragile, and betrayal could be hidden behind even the deepest devotion. You should have told me, I said quietly. Even if it was dangerous, even if it risked everything. We're supposed to be partners, Ethan. We're supposed to be in this together. I know, he whispered, his eyes downcast. I know, and I'm sorry, Hazel. I truly am. I thought I could protect you by keeping you in the dark, but I see now that I was wrong. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my emotions. The anger, the betrayal, the fear. They swirled inside me, but beneath them was something else. Clarity, determination. I couldn't rely on Ethan to protect me anymore. I had to protect myself and the files, I said slowly. The stranger, the meeting in the kitchen last night. What were those about? Ethan flinched, hesitating before speaking. Those files, they contain evidence of Ryan's schemes and Margaret's involvement in some of it. They're proof that they've been manipulating the company and trying to pin things on me. And on you. I couldn't risk them getting into the wrong hands, and I didn't know how to tell you without putting you in danger. I felt a chill. So the bruise, the secrecy, the whispers. It wasn't just about Ethan or Ryan. It was about the company, the family, and my name. And suddenly, everything that had seemed like small, isolated incidents was part of a much larger, more dangerous puzzle. You're telling me this now, I said carefully, because you finally trust me, or because you've realized I'm not the person who will stay in the dark forever. He looked at me, eyes filled with regret and a hint of fear. Maybe a little of both, he admitted. I nodded slowly, my mind racing. The confession was just the beginning. The bruise had opened the door, but beyond it lay secrets, betrayals, and schemes that would test everything I believed about my husband, my family, and myself. And I realized something important. I couldn't wait for answers to come to me. I had to seek them out. I had to uncover every hidden truth, every shadowed conversation, every lie carefully concealed behind smiles and appearances. Because in this house, in this family, the only way to survive was to see everything, and I was ready. The morning after Ethan's confession, the mansion felt suffocating. Silence hung in the halls like a living thing, pressing against the windows and settling over every polished surface. Breakfast was a subdued affair. Oliver chatted happily about school projects, oblivious to the undercurrents swirling around him. Margaret's eyes lingered on Ethan, sharp and calculating, while Ryan's absence was more noticeable than ever. He had left early, claiming urgent business meetings, but I knew better. The truth has a way of spreading, especially in families like ours. It's a slow leak at first, subtle, but once it reaches the wrong ears, the dam breaks. And in this house, there were always wrong ears. I moved through the morning as if in a haze. Every glance from Margaret, a reminder that I was under scrutiny. Every absence of Ryan, a warning. I tried to focus on Oliver, on normalcy, on anything that would ground me, but my mind kept returning to the files Ethan had mentioned. Evidence of Ryan and Margaret's schemes, proof of manipulation and betrayal. I couldn't let it fall into the wrong hands, and yet I couldn't ignore the possibility that the damage had already begun. By midday, my phone buzzed, a notification from a business news outlet. I opened it, and my stomach dropped. Headline: CEO's family scandal surfaces. Billionaire Ethan Blackwell spotted with facial bruise amid alleged internal power struggle. My hands shook as I read the article. Photographs had surfaced. Ethan, looking tense, the bruise under his eye visible. Anonymous sources hinted at corporate sabotage, family infighting, and allegations of unethical practices within the company. The media had caught wind of something, and the storm was beginning. I felt a mix of panic and anger. Panic for Ethan, for us, for Oliver. And anger at the betrayal that had allowed this to happen. How had Ryan leaked this? How had Margaret contributed? And most importantly, how were we going to survive this public spectacle? Ethan returned to the study as I was scrolling through more articles. His face, bruised and pale, reflected the growing stress. He didn't speak at first, just watched me, and I could see the same mixture of fear and helplessness I had seen in his eyes last night. "They're getting to us," I said finally, voice tight. "The media, Ryan, Margaret, they're all getting to us. And the longer we wait, the worse it will get." Ethan ran a hand over his face. "I know, I tried to contain it. I thought I could handle it privately. But it's out now. The press, the staff, the board, they all know something is wrong." I felt a surge of determination. "Then we don't wait anymore. We act. We control the narrative, Ethan, or it controls us. And this time, I'm not staying in the shadows." His gaze met mine, hesitant but acknowledging my resolve. "Are you sure, Hazel? Once we step into the open, there's no going back. The family, the company, the press, they'll all come for you. For us, I'm sure," I said firmly. "We don't have a choice anymore. If we don't fight, we lose everything. And I won't let that happen." We spent the next few hours strategizing. Ethan provided details of Ryan's schemes, unauthorized transactions, falsified report, and secret alliances within the company. Margaret's manipulation of board members to maintain her influence became evident. And the files, they were a goldmine of evidence, not just for exposing the betrayal, but for protecting ourselves. By late afternoon, we had a plan. First, damage control, public statement, internal investigation, transparency without revealing every detail. Second, confronting the family. Margaret and Ryan had to know we were aware, that we were no longer passive, and that we were ready to fight back. Third, protecting Oliver, keeping him safe from the chaos that was inevitably coming. Even as we worked, I could feel the tension in the house shifting. Servants moved with more caution. Whispers seemed to follow me down the halls, and the atmosphere was charged, like the calm before a hurricane. That evening, Ethan and I called a board meeting under the guise of routine updates. But the moment the boardroom doors closed, the storm began. Documents were presented, evidence of manipulation displayed, and questions asked that Ryan and Margaret couldn't answer without incriminating themselves. Ryan's face was unreadable at first, then tight with frustration, then anger. Margaret maintained her usual icy composure, but her eyes flickered with something I hadn't seen before: fear. I watched them carefully, every subtle twitch, every calculated move, and I realized how powerful this moment was. The moment when the golden illusion of family control cracked. "You've underestimated us," I said finally, my voice calm but cutting through the tension like a knife. "You thought we wouldn't see the truth. You thought we would stay in the dark. But the truth is out, and now we decide how it affects us." Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. Ryan's jaw tightened. The board members exchanged uneasy glances. For the first time, the power balance had shifted. It wasn't victory yet, but it was the beginning of reclaiming control. And in that room, standing beside Ethan, I felt a spark I hadn't felt in years. A mixture of fear, resolve, and a growing thirst for justice. After the meeting, we returned to the mansion, exhausted but not defeated. I watched Ethan closely, noting the subtle tremor in his hands, the tension in his shoulders. The bruise under his eye had faded slightly, but its significance remained. It was a reminder of the cost of secrets, of betrayal, and of power. I went to Oliver's room to check on him, brushing his hair from his forehead as he slept. For him, the world was still safe, still whole, and I promised myself that I would do everything in my power to keep it that way. That night, as I lay in bed beside Ethan, I felt the weight of what was to come. The fallout wasn't over. The media, the family, the corporate enemies, they would all react, and each reaction would be a test of strength, strategy, and resilience. But for the first time, I didn't feel powerless. For the first time, I felt like an active player in the game, ready to fight for my family, my name, and the life we had built. The bruise under Ethan's eye had been the spark, the whisper of danger, the warning sign. And now, as the first tremors of fallout shook the mansion, I knew one undeniable truth. We were no longer victims. We were players, and it was time to take control. The house felt alive in a way it never had before. Every corner, every hallway, charged with tension. Margaret and Ryan had returned from their separate errands, unaware that the truth of their schemes was already laid bare in the boardroom. But it wasn't enough that the board knew. Hazel knew, and Hazel was ready. I had spent the morning preparing, rehearsing my words, imagining the possible reactions, and strengthening the resolve I had been building for weeks. This wasn't just about Ethan's bruise anymore. It was about the lies, the betrayals, and the hidden manipulations that had eroded trust in every corner of this family. I found Margaret in the sitting room, pretending to read, as if she could mask the storm she didn't yet know had begun. I took a deep breath and walked toward her, heels clicking softly on the polished floor. "Margaret," I said, my voice calm, measured, and low, but with an edge she couldn't ignore. She looked up, her expression polite, controlled. "Hazel," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "What brings you here?" I smiled. the smile of someone who had seen through every deception, every mask, every hidden motive. "I think it's time we talked." Her eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of irritation betraying her composed exterior. "About what?" "About Ryan, about the files, about Ethan, about all of the things you've tried to hide." I paused, letting the words settle like stones in the room. It's time someone in this house stopped pretending that the truth doesn't matter. Margaret's hand tightened around her book, but she didn't speak. "That silence was enough. I know what you've done," I continued, stepping closer. "I know about the manipulation of the board, the falsified reports, the attempts to control everything in your favor. I know about the midnight meetings, the threats, the schemes designed to make Ethan and me powerless." Margaret's eyes widened slightly, not in fear, but calculation. "And what exactly are you going to do about it, Hazel?" she asked, her voice sharp now. I leaned in slightly, letting my calm mask fall away to reveal the fire beneath. "I'm going to make sure the truth comes out, not just to protect myself and Ethan, but to expose every move you've made. Because in this house, secrets are power, but knowledge is stronger. And I know more than you think." Her lips pressed into a thin line, her eyes darting briefly toward the doorway. I knew she was calculating, thinking of escape routes, of allies, of excuses. But I had her cornered, psychologically, strategically. Just then, Ryan entered, unaware that the first confrontation had already begun. He paused, sensing the tension, and saw Margaret and me facing each other like duelists before a fight. "What's going on?" he asked casually, but the edge in his voice betrayed the suspicion that something had shifted. I turned to him, letting my gaze lock on his. "It's time we stopped pretending, Ryan. About everything. The bruises, the accounts, the files, the threats. The board knows, and now, I know." He laughed softly, almost mockingly. "And what do you think you can do, Hazel? You? Against me?" I smiled, a different smile this time, one not born of politeness, but of control. "I don't need to fight you, Ryan. You've already lost." He froze. "Lost?" His voice was low now, cautious. "Yes," I said firmly. "Because the truth is no longer in your hands. The files, the evidence, the power plays. I control the narrative now. Ethan and I decide how it unfolds. And believe me, your attempts to manipulate, to intimidate, to hide your actions, they're over." Margaret's composure faltered slightly, and Ryan's jaw tightened. They were used to fear controlling the room, to secrecy giving them power, but I had broken through that veil. "You can't," Margaret started, but I cut her off. "I already have," I said, my voice calm but deadly certain. "And there's something else you need to understand. The bruise under Ethan's eye, that was your first mistake, not just because it was violent, but because it underestimated me. You assumed I would stay blind, silent, and obedient. I didn't. I won't." Ryan's eyes darkened, and for a moment, I saw the man who had built his empire on intimidation and manipulation. Cornered, unsure, vulnerable. "I think it's time you both understood something fundamental," I continued. "Power isn't about fear. It isn't about threats. It isn't about bruises or whispers. Power is about strategy, intelligence, and knowing when to act. And I've been acting, silently, carefully. For weeks." Margaret's lips parted slightly, as if to speak, but I didn't give her the chance. "Ryan," I said, turning to him, "every transaction, every secret account, every hidden move you've made to control the company and Ethan, it's all exposed. The board knows, the press knows, and now I know. And I promise you, I'm just getting started." The room was silent, the tension almost unbearable. Both Margaret and Ryan were caught off guard, their calculated masks faltering. I could see the flickers of fear, frustration, and disbelief. They had assumed control was theirs to wield indefinitely. But they had misjudged me. I took a step back, letting the silence stretch, letting the weight of my words settle over them. I didn't come into this marriage to play the victim, I said, my voice steady and calm. I came in to be a partner, and now I intend to take back what's ours. What's been manipulated, stolen, and hidden from us. And if you think you can stop me, think again. Margaret swallowed hard, and Ryan's jaw clenched. They realized, perhaps for the first time, that I wasn't someone who could be intimidated. That the bruise, the secrecy, the whispers, all of it had prepared me for this moment. Ethan, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. She's right, he said quietly. I've tried to protect her, to shield her from the chaos, but it's time we confront it head on. Together, I looked at him, gratitude and resolve mixing in my chest. We were a team now, a united front against the manipulations of our own family. Ryan finally spoke, voice low and dangerous. This isn't over, Hazel, I smiled. A cold, controlled smile. No, Ryan, it's just beginning. Margaret said nothing, retreating to her chair, her mind clearly racing. For the first time in decades, she felt uncertain, and that uncertainty was my advantage. I turned toward Ethan, letting the adrenaline settle just slightly. The board, the press, the family. We handle it all strategically, step by step, every move calculated, every threat neutralized. And we start by securing ourselves, and then I paused, letting the implication hangs. Then we take back control of the empire. Ethan nodded, eyes dark but resolute. Together, he said. Yes, I whispered, almost to myself. Together, as I left the sitting room, the tension behind me like a live wire. I knew the path ahead would be treacherous. Ryan and Margaret were not people who forgave easily, and their desire for control would not vanish overnight. But for the first time, I felt like I had the upper hand. The bruise under Ethan's eye had been the spark. The confrontation was the fire. And now, it was time to burn the manipulations down and reclaim everything that had been stolen from us. After the confrontation, the house was tense, but deceptively calm. Margaret and Ryan moved with practiced composure, but I could feel the cracks in their masks. They were calculating their next moves, measuring every word, every gesture, knowing I had shifted the balance of power. Ethan and I retreated to our private study that evening, reviewing the files he had secured. Each document revealed another layer of betrayal. Unauthorized transactions, hidden investments, manipulations of board votes. But among the numbers and letters, I noticed something odd. A set of files I hadn't seen before, tucked behind innocuous folders. Ethan, I said quietly, pointing. What's this? He frowned and leaned over. I don't know. I haven't seen those. I opened the first file and my eyes widened. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about the company. It was about something much darker. A long-term plan, carefully hidden, that implicated both Margaret and Ryan. In a scheme far beyond corporate manipulation, the documents detailed shell companies, offshore accounts, and covert operations that suggested Margaret and Ryan had been siphoning money, not just from the company, but from private investments, charitable funds, and even hidden assets that legally belonged to the family estate. But more than that, there were indications of alliances with unknown parties, people outside the family, people with power, influence, and possibly dangerous intentions. This, I whispered, feeling my pulse quicken. This isn't just greed. This is calculated. Years of planning. And they've involved outside forces. Ethan leaned closer, scanning the files. His eyes widened. This could ruin them, or us. If we move wrong, we're exposed to whatever they've been working with. These aren't just family schemes. They're dangerous networks. I sat back, feeling a mix of dread and exhilaration. The game had shifted. What I thought had been a battle of wills within the family was actually part of a larger, more dangerous plan, one that could destroy us if we weren't careful. We need to understand the full scope, I said firmly. We need to find out who they've aligned with and what their endgame is. If we don't, we're walking blind into a trap. Ethan nodded, his face tense. Agreed, but we have to be careful. They have influence, connections. If they realize we're onto them, it could get ugly. I felt a surge of determination. Then we do this strategically, step by step. I'll handle the family side. You handle the corporate side. And together, we uncover everything they've hidden. Every secret, every alliance, every betrayal. For hours we worked, piecing together what we could. But even as the puzzle began to take shape, a new, unsettling realization struck me. Margaret and Ryan had been planning for years, anticipating moves like ours, and possibly even ours in particular. We weren't just playing catch-up. We were playing against architects of a long-term plan, masters of manipulation and deception. The next morning, I decided to test the waters. I approached Margaret under the guise of reconciliation. "Margaret," I said softly, meeting her in the sunlit foyer. "We need to talk, privately." Her expression was unreadable. "Of course," she said, masking the tension I could sense beneath her calm exterior. We walked to the library, a neutral space I hoped would allow for honest conversation, or at least information. I sat down, keeping my composure, letting her think she had the upper hand. "Margaret," I began carefully, "I know more than you think. I've seen documents, files, everything, and I need to understand your plan, your agenda." Her eyes narrowed, but her lips curled in a polite smile. "Hazel, I'm not sure what you mean. My agenda has always been the same. Family, company, legacy." I leaned in slightly. "Really?" Because from where I stand, it looks like something else entirely. Shell companies, hidden accounts, alliances outside the family. What are you trying to accomplish? Margaret's mask faltered for a moment, just a flicker, and I knew I had touched a nerve. "You don't understand the pressures, Hazel. You have no idea what it takes to maintain power, to protect this family's empire. Ethan, he's naive. You're naive. And sometimes, sacrifices are necessary." I held her gaze, unblinking. "Sacrifices that could destroy us. That could destroy our family." "I don't think so, Margaret. And I want to know, who else is involved? Who are these outside parties?" For a heartbeat, she hesitated. Then, almost imperceptibly, her lips twitched. "You're clever, Hazel. Maybe too clever. But the truth is dangerous. Some truths are better left buried." I smiled, my voice calm but edged with warning. Some truths can't stay buried, and I intend to uncover every one of them. Because if you think for a second that I will let you manipulate, threaten, or control our family, you're wrong. Dead wrong. Margaret's hands tightened on the armrests of her chair. "You really think you can stop me?" "I don't think, Margaret," I said softly. "I will." As I left the library, a chill ran down my spine. Margaret and Ryan's hidden agenda was far more dangerous than I had imagined, and now I was entangled in it fully. But I also realized something else. For the first time, I felt the thrill of the hunt, the clarity of purpose, the understanding that in order to survive and win, I had to anticipate, outthink, and outmaneuver them at every turn. That night, as Ethan and I reviewed the files again, I shared what I had learned from Margaret. His face darkened. "They've planned this for years, and they have resources we don't even know about." I nodded. "Then we learn, we observe, we wait for the right moment. And when it comes, we act decisively. We take back control. Fully, strategically, without leaving a trace of weakness." Ethan looked at me, and for the first time, I saw hope and fear intertwined. "You're incredible, Hazel. I don't know how you do it." I smiled. feeling the full weight of the challenge ahead. I do it because I have to, and because I won't let anyone, not Margaret, not Ryan, not anyone, threaten what's mine, what's ours, or what's rightfully protected. The hidden agenda wasn't just a revelation. It was a declaration. The battle had shifted from subtle manipulation to high-stakes strategy, and I was ready to play and to win. And in that moment, I understood the truth that had been simmering beneath all the bruises, whispers, and secrets. In this house, in this family, only the clever, the bold, and the patient survive. And I was all three. The mansion was eerily quiet that evening, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. After days of confronting lies, uncovering files, and navigating tense standoffs, I thought I had seen the worst the family could throw at me. I was wrong. It began with a simple envelope slipped under my bedroom door. No name, no markings, just a plain cream-colored envelope. My pulse quickened as I picked it up, carefully breaking the seal. Inside were documents, detailed, meticulously organized, that made my blood run cold. They weren't just about corporate maneuverings, offshore accounts, or secret alliances. These were personal, intimate, revealing betrayals I hadn't anticipated. The first page hit me like a blow. Correspondence between Ethan's closest advisors and Margaret, discussing ways to manipulate not just the company, but Ethan himself, to undermine his decisions and make him dependent on their guidance. The second page outlined financial manipulations that implicated not only Ryan, but even Ethan's late father. A web of deception that had stretched back years, designed to consolidate Margaret and Ryan's control over the family empire. And then I saw it, a letter addressed to me, written in Ethan's handwriting. At first glance, it seemed like a love letter, but reading closely, I realized it was a confession he had hidden. A record of moments when he had withheld information from me, justified in his mind as protection. My heart ached, but beneath it was a spark of anger. He had loved me. He had feared for me, but he had also lied. And in that deception, he had allowed the family to manipulate events, placing me in danger more than once. I slammed the envelope down, breathing hard, feeling a storm of emotions rage inside me. Hurt, betrayal, fury, but also clarity. The line between love and control had been blurred for far too long. Then I noticed a second set of documents, hidden behind the first. My hands trembled as I unfolded them. They were contracts, signed but never executed, showing Margaret's attempts to secure my personal assets, my trust funds, and even properties I had thought were mine by inheritance. And worse, Ryan's fingerprints were all over them, approving and facilitating her plans. The ultimate betrayal wasn't just secrecy, it was premeditation. They had been plotting not only to control the company, but to erase me from the family's wealth and influence entirely. Quietly, legally, and ruthlessly. I felt a cold clarity wash over me. Every bruise, every whisper, every midnight meeting. It had been leading to this. They weren't just manipulating Ethan or the companies. They were manipulating me, my life, my future. I sank into a chair, my mind racing. If they were willing to do this quietly, how far would they go openly? How far would they push if they thought they could get away with it? Ethan entered the room then, unaware I had discovered the letters. He paused at the doorway, sensing my agitation. "What's wrong, Hazel?" he asked cautiously. I looked up, my eyes sharp and determined. "Everything you tried to protect me from. I've seen it." His face fell. "Hazel." "No," I interrupted, voice firm. "Not this time. No more half-truths. No more secrets. I've seen Margaret's plans. Ryan's plans. How far they've been willing to go to erase me, to manipulate everything and everyone around me. And I've seen your letters, Ethan. Every moment you kept me in the dark. Every decision you made to protect me. He ran a hand through his hair, guilt and fear flashing in his eyes. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was keeping you safe. I never meant. I know, I said softly, letting the anger settle slightly. But knowing isn't enough anymore. I can't rely on anyone to protect me. Not even you. I have to protect myself. And starting tonight, I do. I stood, feeling the weight of my newfound clarity. The hidden agenda, the midnight meetings, the boardroom maneuvers, they all led to this revelation. Margaret and Ryan had underestimated me. They assumed fear, secrecy, and manipulation would keep me passive. But they were wrong. Ethan stepped closer, voice low. Hazel, what do you plan to do? I met his eyes. We fight, strategically. We expose them. We reclaim what's ours. And we make sure everyone knows the truth. The board, the press, the public. Margaret and Ryan have spent years building their empire of lies. But lies crumble when faced with strategy and determination. He nodded, his eyes darkening with resolve. Then we do it together. I took a deep breath. Together, I repeated. But we need to be careful. They've aligned with people outside the family. They have resources we don't fully understand. We can't rush. We can't act without a plan. Ethan's gaze softened, a flicker of relief passing over his face. I trust you, Hazel. I always have. And now, I finally understand how strong you are. I smiled. A cold, measured smile. Strength doesn't come from ignorance or obedience. Strength comes from knowledge, preparation, and the willingness to act when the time is right. And tonight, we start acting. I spent the rest of the night analyzing the documents, mapping out connections, and identifying vulnerabilities. Every letter, every contract, every hidden transaction became a piece of a puzzle that, once completed, would allow us to expose Margaret and Ryan completely. Not just to the board or the press, but to the world. By dawn, I had a plan, a calculated, step-by-step strategy that would protect Ethan, secure Oliver, and dismantle Margaret and Ryan's empire of deception. But even as the first light of morning filtered through the windows, I knew the most dangerous part of this battle was still ahead. Because the ultimate betrayal wasn't just hidden in files or letters. It was hidden in the hearts of the people I had trusted most. And now I knew exactly how to turn that betrayal into my weapon. The game was no longer about survival. It was about victory. The house was quieter than I had ever known it, but the tension was palpable. Electric, heavy, and suffocating. Every shadow seemed to stretch toward me like an accomplice of betrayal. But I felt nothing but clarity, determination, and the cold satisfaction of preparation. Ethan stood beside me, his face still bearing the faint traces of bruises. But his eyes were steady, focused. For weeks we had collected evidence, mapped connections, and planned each step meticulously. The hidden agendas, the shell companies, the secret meetings, the outside alliances, all were now weapons we could wield. I stepped into the boardroom, documents in hand, eyes scanning the familiar faces of our family, the board members, and even a few reporters I had quietly invited. Margaret and Ryan entered moments later, both projecting calm, both unaware that the walls of deception they had built were about to crumble around them. I smiled, the kind of controlled, confident smile that masks fury and intelligence simultaneously. "Good evening," I began, my voice calm, commanding, and echoing slightly in the grand room. "Tonight, we address the truths that have been hidden, the manipulations that have been executed, and the betrayals that have gone unchallenged for far too long." Margaret's lips tightened, and Ryan's jaw clenched. They knew immediately that something was different. I wasn't just confronting them emotionally. I was armed with proof, strategy, and clarity. Let's begin with the documents, I said, gesturing to the files on the table. These contain evidence of unauthorized transactions, falsified reports, and secret meetings orchestrated by both of you to manipulate the company, the board, and the family. Gasps echoed around the room. Board members leaned forward, eyes wide. Margaret's fingers tightened around her notebook, her composure fraying at the edges. Ryan's posture stiffened, the polite mask of confidence faltering. I continued, each word deliberate, each revelation precise. Margaret, Ryan, your plans to control the company and the family estate were extensive. Shell companies, hidden accounts, alliances with outside parties. All of it meticulously planned to consolidate your influence and erase those who could challenge you. Margaret's voice was sharp, defensive. Hazel, these are allegations. You have no proof. I held up a folder, letting the stack of documents catch the light. Proof is right here. Emails, contracts, transaction histories, and correspondence that you can't deny. Every step you took, every plan you executed, is recorded. Ryan's voice was low, dangerous. Do you think showing these to the board will save you? They know how powerful we are, how influential our alliances are. I met his gaze, unflinching. Influence is temporary. Strategy and truth are permanent. And tonight, I decide the narrative. I turned to the board, presenting the timeline I had meticulously constructed, linking each action, email, and transaction to a date, a decision, and a motive. The room was silent, the air heavy with realization. Margaret and Ryan could no longer hide behind power or fear. Their schemes had been exposed. Ethan stepped forward, his voice steady. I can attest to every point Hazel has made. I've witnessed the manipulation firsthand. I've been complicit only because I was kept in the dark about certain aspects. But the truth is clear now. Hazel's assessment is accurate. Board members whispered among themselves, the tension reaching a crescendo. The reporters I had invited quietly documented every detail, every revelation, ensuring the world beyond these walls would know the truth. Margaret's face paled slightly, and Ryan's eyes darted toward her. They realized the magnitude of the exposure, not just internally, but publicly. Their alliances, their plans, their influence, all at risk. I pressed forward, addressing them directly. You assumed fear and secrecy would protect you. You underestimated the resilience, intelligence, and courage of those you sought to manipulate. But now, the truth has a new champion. One who will not be silenced, one who will not be intimidated, and one who will not forgive betrayal. Margaret finally spoke, voice strained but defiant. And what do you intend to do, Hazel? Take everything from us. I smiled coldly. Justice, Margaret. Balance. Accountability. You will retain what is rightfully yours. But every scheme, every deception, every betrayal will be addressed and corrected. The board will ensure transparency. The press will document truth. And the family will no longer be manipulated by fear. Ryan's shoulders slumped slightly. The fight drained from him. He understood now that the empire of deception they had built for years had crumbled in moments, undone by clarity, preparation, and unwavering courage. The board took control from that point, guided by the documents and strategy I had presented. Investigations were launched, corrective measures were put in place, and public statements were issued. The press reported accurately, revealing the family's internal struggles without allowing rumors to dominate. Ethan and I stood side by side, watching as the house of cards fell for Margaret and Ryan, not with vindictive glee, but with measured satisfaction, knowing justice had been served, and the truth restored balance. Later that evening, the mansion was quiet again, but this time the calm was different. It was a calm born of control, not fear. I walked through the halls, finally free from the shadows of manipulation. Every room a testament to the battles fought and won. Ethan joined me, taking my hand. "You were incredible," he said quietly. "I don't know what I would have done without you." I looked at him, a mix of love, relief, and strength in my gaze. "We did it together," I said. "But this isn't just about surviving Ethan. It's about protecting our family, reclaiming our power, and ensuring no one ever manipulates us again." He nodded, eyes softening. "Together, always." And in that moment, I understood the full arc of what had happened. The bruise under Ethan's eye, the whispered secrets, the midnight meetings, the hidden agendas, all had led to this reckoning. A reckoning that tested my courage, my intelligence, and my resilience. The family had tried to control, manipulate, and undermine us. But in the end, the truth had prevailed. Justice had been restored, and I had discovered something more valuable than wealth, influence, or power. I had discovered my own strength. I knew the road ahead would not be entirely free of challenges. Margaret and Ryan would continue to scheme. The world would continue to test us, and life itself would throw trials in our path. But I also knew this: I would never allow myself, or those I loved, to be controlled by fear, secrecy, or manipulation again. The mansion, once a place of whispered threats and hidden bruises, now felt alive with possibility. For the first time, I walked through it unafraid, unshaken, and in control. And as I looked out over the estate, bathed in the soft glow of the evening sun, I allowed myself to smile. Not with arrogance, but with the calm confidence of someone who had faced betrayal, uncovered truth, and emerged stronger, wiser, and unstoppable. The reckoning was complete. The past had been confronted, and the future, ours to claim, stretched ahead, bright and unbroken. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. See you in the next one. Peace out.